This is Jim Maddox with CenturyLink. I want to thank everyone for joining the CenturyLink Zadara Storage webinar. Several years ago, CenturyLink realized that in order to add additional value to our customers, we needed to partner with other solution providers in the market. So over the past few years, we've formed partnerships with a lot of organizations, cloud providers like AWS, Azure, and others, companies like NetApp and EMC, security companies like RiskSense and Checkpoint, hardware companies like Cisco and ShoreTel, and many others. We evaluate potential partnerships based on the value that they can bring to our customers. When we looked at Zadara for a partnership, the value was obvious to us. The Zadara solution is causing a complete shift, unlike anything I've seen in the market, in how organizations are consuming storage. As we go through this presentation, don't think about storage from a technical standpoint, though we will go through the technology, but rather think about it from the perspective of how you consume it and what this model will enable you to do. So with that, I'm going to hand off to Sean Yankley with Zadara Storage.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining today. Again, this is Sean Yankley. I'm the Global Account Manager for Zadara Storage with CenturyLink. And Doug Jury, our Vice President of Solutions, is on as well today. We are going to be taking you through an overview on the technology and the solution and the kind of the, as Jim said, the very bit different business proposition really that this brings to your typical storage environment. The feedback that we've seen over the years is, this is just completely different, quote unquote, than what people are used to. The company itself has been around for close to 7 years. We originally got started actually in the public cloud. Specifically, we saw that there was a need for some additional features and capabilities within the cloud that they didn't have themselves. And to that end, we actually got started originally with the two main providers. If you think back 7 years ago, there was really only Rackspace and Amazon, AWS. So we now have 9 to 10 additional capabilities and features in the public cloud. We're also in Google and Azure, KT, Telecity, basically sites around the globe actually in the public site. But the other big thing is that we are actually in data centers and on-premise. So the solution we're going to talk today, you can actually have this wherever you want it. You can have it in your own data center, you can have it in a colo, you can have it in the public cloud, and it's the bridge between any of these to move data between them. In terms of types of clients and our clientele, it really runs the gamut from some of the biggest companies in the world down to mid-size enterprise global. Many cities and counties, states are using our solution as well, and we'll talk more about that today because of our unique features that work specifically around public safety, communities, municipalities. Because everybody, regardless of your agency or industry, typically is having their data grow. The issue with data growth is it's fantastic typically because it's better information, more detail for the end users, but it's not so good for the storage administrator trying to make an educated guess about how much storage they need for the next 3 to 5 years when they're making a purchase. To that end, when you look at video forensics as an example, but this really goes across the gamut, regardless of industry, in terms of the infrastructure. In most cases, storage is roughly 20%, 25% of the initial transaction. When you look at it over a 3 to 5 year period of time, it's an iceberg. Because that 25%, basically whatever you spend up front, is only going to account for about 25% of the actual cost to the business and the agency over the next 3 to 5 years. And actually, as applications and data and things like 4K imaging are now coming out, that number is actually going to become even exponentially larger. We'll talk more about that today. So today, when you go buy storage, when you're going out to purchase storage, and it really doesn't matter whether it's for your business, for your agency, or for your home computer. You're basically buying storage based on how much capacity you think you need and the performance you think you need. So we're all buying at this peak. You basically are making an educated guess about how much you're going to need in the future and what's the maximum performance you think it's going to draw on the system, and then you build it for that. Obviously, there's a significant cost impact due to that, and it's absolutely true, Murphy's Law, you pretty much 100% of the time are going to get it wrong. Now, most of the time, you're going to over-purchase. It's an interesting statistic. The average utilization for storage, now this is across all vendors across the world, but the average utilization by the time they need to refresh, so not when they first purchase it, but by the time they actually need to go, so around 3.8 months, 3 years, 8 months out, the average utilization is only around 42 to 44%. So you're not even getting 50 cents on the dollar of what you bought by the time you're having to go out and buy the new technology. To that end, many companies are looking at moving to the cloud, to public cloud or private, going off to colos, exactly where CenturyLink and Zadara are focused. And traditional storage is actually going down significantly too from a CapEx model. And it makes sense. You have this CapEx expense, that you have a sunk cost that you're hoping will fit your business need, but the problem is it's not flexible and it doesn't grow unless you go buy something else or buy more to add to it. Having the ability to be flexible and nimble obviously is a much better position for the client. So that's exactly what Zadara does. What if you could have a solution from CenturyLink that allows you to only pay for what you consume, a true consumption model? So if you have an event, say it's a parade, well, and you have a lot of different video imaging coming in, or you have a campaign going on, or you have a rally going on. I mean, that's been happening a lot lately, right? So you have all this information, and it could be way more than just body-worn cameras and dash cams. This could be off stationary, on telephone poles. It could be from mass transit, all of those. So you have this information that comes in, but then the event's over, maybe nothing happened, so you don't need it. Or say you move it off to a different tier of storage or off to tape for long-term archive. The point is, what if you could actually have your storage match your business need rather than trying to figure out your business need and then buying storage to work around it? That's exactly what Zadara and CenturyLink are bringing to the market. If we look at digital evidence management, right, the design goal is pretty straightforward. We want to be able to have meet safety and legal requirements. The real goal would be that the user experience is completely unchanged. It would be not much different than the process and what they go through today, so that there's not a large learning curve. Seamless process for support, and also setting the stage for growth without breaking the budget. I had a client just this last month. They actually, the city and county we met with, and the commissioners, and between the police department, fire, and the courts, what they had budgeted for the next 3.5, well, in fact, they said it was going to be 4 to 5 years was their plan when they purchased this just 9 months ago. They bought storage, capital expense. It was supposed to last them 4 to 5 years. Well, all of a sudden, 4K imaging came out. What used to take up, I'll just give some rough numbers, but around 100 gigabyte for the average officer between their patrol car and their body-worn camera. And then 4K imaging came, what went from 100 gig went to 1 terabyte. They're actually going to be out of storage in 18 months. And they really don't know what they're going to do because it caused a massive issue. They can't just go back and find more funding. This is real world scenario. So the ability to grow without breaking the budget. Real world scenario, an occurrence happens. It could be somebody, making a citizen makes an accusation that they had some abuse or some issue. So now all of a sudden you have the officer, the courts, the chief of police, the mayor, public industry as well. It could be the TV stations, all these people want access to that information. You have information typically in the process flowing between all these different groups. You're sending copies of the data, copies of the video imaging back and forth, obviously growing your data even further because now you have multiple copies of the same thing. There can be financial and political impact for this type of thing. And then also, what do we do tactically to resolve it, but also set it up for the future? And then there also can be specific costs associated, literal dollar figures that go back into this. When we look at digital management in terms of all the different contact points of that information. What clients are saying about their current storage vendors, these are literally quotes in specific areas that we've got feedback. Extensive trainings required. It needs lots of resources, both financial and personnel. They have to have multiple people just to support it. Very challenging buying cycle. What happens if I need it quickly? If I have to go get a PO, go out and do an RFP, then a PO and get it through, do vetting. This can take months sometimes. Big one, how much and when do I buy? You've created islands of silos really of data and storage. If you think about it, you typically will have one system and one storage set for your day-to-day operations. Each agency typically has their own storage, right? And if you're doing backups, they might have another set of storage. And each of these is a silo unto its own. In that previous slide where I showed the courts, the mayor, the police department, the citizen, prosecuting attorney, maybe defense attorney, all of these people, they all have their own individual silos as data. And what in the world do I do if I run out? That's the problem I just mentioned a second ago with one of our current clients. You know, it was supposed to last 4 years. It's going to be gone in 18 months. The bottom line answer is you have to change how you buy storage. You have to change the way you think about it. But to be able to change that model, you actually have to have a different technology, right, to meet your business need rather than having the business need driving storage that you're going out and purchase. And that's exactly what Zadara does. With CenturyLink, we are now bringing to market, and have been having it, as I said, for years now, 100% consumption-based utility model. There's no surprises. It's literally mistake-free. In fact, the tagline is, you can't get it wrong. Today, when you buy your storage, one, you're buying on capacity. We already talked about that. But you're also buying the performance you think you need, the controllers, right? Well, there's something called Moore's Law. Basically, performance increases and cost goes down, you know, right around every 14 months or so. Today, when do you get the latest and greatest technology? You get it when you buy your next desktop or your new computer or your new storage, right? But we're now talking 3 or 4 years out, so it can become kind of obsolete. What if you could actually change out the drives to get the latest and greatest technology, get the latest controllers and update without buying anything new? You get the best technology when it becomes available. It's all included, all administrative services. You do not have to have a Zadara storage specialist. Fully managed, we maintain this, supports 24/7 proactive maintenance anywhere in the globe, and it includes your tech refresh. So what if you never had to go through the whole brain damage of doing a refresh in the first place? Very stringent SLAs, which we'll talk about today. It ties perfectly into your high availability and high performance with potentially zero upfront cost. You're able to get started with this on-premise or in the cloud specifically, at zero upfront cost. It's just paying for consumption. Doug?
Absolutely, thanks, Sean. And this is Doug Jury, the VP of Solutions. When we started this project, Zadara, about 7 years ago, this slide would have been very, very simple. It would have said any location as long as it's in the public cloud. It would have said any data type as long as it's block, and it would have said any protocol as long as it's iSCSI. And that to me isn't universal storage. So over the last 7 years, we filled it in to help customers. Everybody has an install base, legacy equipment, things that we have to adapt to. So what we want to do is we want to put together an environment that's all encompassing. Basically, you can have it in any location, whether it be in a CenturyLink data center, in a public cloud, or in your own colo or data center. We want to be able to do any data types, block, file, or object. The key here is that we're going to talk about a little bit further is the silos of storage. Today, most customers have NetApp for NFS and maybe CIFS. They have maybe EMC for their block and databases, and then maybe they have an Isilon or some form of object storage. That to me is not very consolidating of your tools, of your skills, of your people, of any of that, because you've got all these silos. So we basically have blended that into one architecture. And then the protocols down the bottom. If you have a Brocade or Cisco fiber channel environment, we can go there. Most people are moving to iSCSI today, so we can basically go there. And iSer is a very high performance RDMA over iSCSI. And when I talk about our environment, I'll talk a little bit about iSer. It's a really cool 40 gigabit technology. Don't want to go into a rat hole here too far. And then NFS and CIFS with Active Directory, that's going to blend into most customers' workspaces, and then S3 and Swift. So what we want to do is we want to have not only a universal storage platform that a customer can basically just have one thing to learn and to manage and to work forward with. So Sean, next slide. Let's talk about where this works. I'm going to go from sort of left to right. If you are a cloud customer and you want to use the cloud, then absolutely that's a possibility. We basically stand up our physical equipment. We are a storage company, so we have hardware and we have software and we have all the things that do the task. but basically we can connect into all the various cloud providers through CenturyLink, of course. We also can basically do it on the right-hand side, which is put it in your data center or in a CenturyLink data center or wherever it happens to be. And then we can also work this through some various service providers as well. So this is also back to that universal storage slide where we can do it anywhere you want to be, and we can basically provide these resources that Sean was just talking about. So the next slide, let's go ahead and talk a little bit about the sort of the genesis of Zadara. So when we basically came together as a bunch of IT professionals, you can go to the next slide, Sean. When we basically came together as a bunch of IT professionals, we had worked together for about 10 years in another startup called Storage. And we said, okay, what is the next big idea? What do we want to do? Remember, this is in 2010, 2011. And we said, okay, we know enterprise storage really well, and we know what that is. Enterprise storage says we can stand toe to toe with the EMCs, the NetApps, the IBMs, the Hitachis of the world by giving you the performance and the caching and the drive types and the RAID types and all the nitty gritty buttons and knobs that customers want when they basically put together an enterprise storage solution. But then we said the big idea here is to create this product and this company as a service. This is why people ask me all the time. They say, Doug, how come NetApp and EMC and IBM haven't really jumped into this as a service business? And the key is that they are a publicly traded company that moving to an as a service business is very, very difficult. You no longer get the $1 million checks coming in, which means you as the customers no longer have to sign the $1 million checks to get the equipment in your data center. It's an OpEx model. It has to be elastic and easily modified and no upfront costs, and all the things that are on this as a service is what you need to do. So you need to build a product, and you have to basically build a company that adheres to this. One of the key differentiators, and we'll talk about this when we create a VPSA, is this multi-tenancy, multi-tenant environments in a single tenant experience. Everybody would like to take these silos and blend them together. They'd like to be able to have their NetApps running or their NFS running right next to their high performance block, right next to their libraries and their object storage. They'd like to be able to do that in one environment. Of course we would. We don't want to have different houses based on what we're doing or different vehicles to do what we're doing. We want to have that all basically in one environment. But especially with this type of a business that we're in, the public safety business, we have to be able to create single tenant experience. And we'll talk about that in a second, which is also the performance isolation. So Sean, you're up.
Sure. On the VPSA, one of the key things specifically to public safety, certainly the federal, even dark sites that we're working with, three-letter acronym agencies, those type, was the ability to have this physical isolation that we're going to talk more about and 100% security. To that end, one of the key things today, if you're in somebody else's data center, if you're certainly in the public cloud, but even within your own storage, if you tried to offer storage out to multi-agencies, which in my years of doing this and talking to groups, almost every single centralized office of technology understands the value of multi-tenancy. They understand that if they could have multiple agencies or multiple projects or departments working off the same thing, be much better economy of scale and much better utilization of funding. The problem's always been threefold. One, who buys it up front? Who pays the big multi-million-dollar investment? Two, how do we have the security, isolation, and things like encryption? And three, how do we do a chargeback? And we're going to go through all those pieces today. One of the critical pieces is right here. Today, if you're in somebody else's data center, if they're in your storage, if you're providing encryption, the provider is who keeps the key. This changes that whole model. The end user owns the keys for at-rest and in-flight data encryption. This is a huge, huge plus for public safety and security. In terms of protection and data protection features, we have snapshots for redirect on write, for high availability, for that type of thing. The key thing is you now have the ability with these to have multiple instances of the data, but not having to make full volume copies. And I'm going to show you that in the next slide here, where for redaction and for chain of custody, those types of things, this is a very big plus. We can do mirroring, but not just one direction. We can do many to one and one to many. We can do bidirectional DR or replication. So you now could start offering consolidated backup to multiple agencies. We're talking with many cities and counties, even state entities, where they're offering this out to agencies, where they're now able to come back and say, look, for extremely low cost, we can offer you centralized backup and DR for your core data set, better utilization, but at the same time, they have the isolation because it's physically going to be isolated, even in the backup realm. To that end, today, if you had your standard storage array, this is what would be happening. You'd be writing to that primary source of data and changing it. What we do is what's called redirect on write. So we freeze that primary source. We create a point in time where now all changes are occurring here. So the writes are going to this point in time, but the reads are coming from both. So this might be 8 a.m. in the morning. This might be at 9 a.m. So then we have these points in time every hour. So there's something statistically called, well, I should put it this way. The reason why you have to go recover, right? Statistically, 93 to 95% of the time is to what's called a logical failure, human error, virus, and corruption. You now have these point in times to go back and instantaneously recover an application, a file, a document. Go back to before you had the corruption. Say all of a sudden here at 11 a.m. we start seeing a problem. We can go back in time and mount up this as our primary, clean up the corruption, and then pull the data back in, whatever works. At the same time, say we have an event that occurs. Other agencies want to be able to use that data or access that data as well. You know, it could be defense attorney, prosecuting attorney, the courts, certainly police, and so forth. I can now mount up a view of the data. They'll have their own clones to be able to work off of, and simultaneously have multiple agencies have access to the same data source without having to make full volume copies. The other big thing is 100% chain of custody. You know exactly, because this data is frozen. Think of it as worm technology. Write once, read many, right? So now I have this worm capability to go out to multiple agencies or end users or departments and have them have their own capability to work off the data, do some redaction, do some investigation, additional work against the information. And at any time, for business continuity and high availability, I have this ability to roll back. And by the way, all these features, everything you're seeing today comes with the solution. This isn't one of these, oh, you wanted that capability. It'll be another $10,000. This is all inclusive. So Doug, I'll throw it back to you, creating a VPSA. And again, just I think we skipped over that. The company is Zadara. Our product, our solution is called VPSA, Virtual Private Storage Array.
Perfect. Thanks, John. So every customer gets their own custom web page, and I don't know who's on this call per se, as far as your company names or so I'm going to just show CenturyLink here, but this would be your company name here. We have a small region in North Carolina that's using this for forensic data. They started with about 20 cameras and about 10 or 15 terabytes. They've grown up now to about 60 or 70 terabytes. They've got about 100 cameras now connected in. And every time they want to grow, they'll come to this slide, their own private URL, and they'll go ahead and do it. So let's go ahead and create one. Let's say that this was this small county in North Carolina, and they create, basically it says VPSA name, and it would say, you know, maybe event number 1, and then down below it says VPSA description, and it might say, you know, something that went on between July 15th and July 30th or something like that. That's how long this event is going to go. And all the data is going to go into this particular piece of storage. So now we basically, let's say that they have 4 or 5 different regions. So we can say, where do we want to create the storage? Is it in region 1, 2, 3, or 4? And then to select the Zadara engine. An engine, if you're technical at all, the engine is synonymous with a RAID controller. Basically, we're going to create a virtual RAID controller out of the cores and the disks that are within our hardware configuration. So in this case, I'm creating a 6 CPU RAID engine, and we'll show you how that works in a little bit. And that would give you a maximum of around 20 drives and the cost associated there. Then we're going to select the drive quantities. Now, this is not what would probably be shipped. This is a little bit older slide, but it could be 10 terabyte drives. It could be 1.6 terabyte SSDs moving to 4. It could be a lot of different configurations here. So this is your creation page. This is your e-commerce page. This is how you're going to actually carve out the VPSAs. So, and then over to the right, as soon as you go through this little calculator calculator, it's going to give you a representation of how much this is going to cost you per hour, and then you can easily extrapolate that. Any of the numbers in this presentation are list prices. We give great discounts for 12, 24, 36-month commits, things like that. There's all kinds of different ways of putting this together. Again, our company is operating expense. So we've got a lot of latitude to make things work for you. We're a roll up our sleeves kind of company, and that's what we want to do. So if we hit the submit,
and you can offer this out to different departments. This is the key in different agencies, right? So you'd have one main screen they'd go to with maybe your city and county, but then each of these could be individual, as Doug was going through, to their specific need, and they would know specifically what they're getting and be able to request that.
Right, and the next slide will show that. So let's go to the next one. Let's say event one was by department number one, or down the street on Main Street, and they create a VPSA. And they, in this particular example, they've selected a 200 engine. Remember, we said 200, 400, 600, 800 engines are basically performance-driven numbers. In this case, you hit the submit button to create this VPSA for Main Street, down the street. And OpenStack is going to give you 2 cores. They're going to pull out 2 cores of this hardware infrastructure. 1 core for an active RAID controller and another core for a standby RAID controller. So we have fully redundant configurations. And we're also going to select 4 drives. So if those are 4, say 10 terabyte drives today, that would be a total of 40 terabytes. We protect that with RAID 1 protection, so you have a 20 terabyte configuration. And that's about how this small county in North Carolina started, with basically about a 20 terabyte configuration. Now, right behind that, another department, another region, another whatever, just created event number 2. There's something coming up for a lot of body-worn cameras coming in. This could be a different set of collateral, a different set of logins, different set of snapshots, different way we want to encrypt. These couldn't be more disparate than having silos of storage. But the nice thing is the economy of scale says I only have to train and develop and work on one platform. So now I have this event number 2. I have a 400 series engine, so OpenStack AVEN. Our software, our patented software, creates 2 cores for active and 2 cores for standby, and assigns 10 physical drives, not parts of pools, not virtual drives, but physical drives. So if you were to decommission this, and there's a lot of information on these drives, you could scrub them and wipe the data. If that's not good enough for your regulations, we can literally pull these drives out and we can ship them to you. There's no other customer data on this except for event number 2. And this is also the big idea we had, was to make sure that we sequester the data and the drives and the cores and the cache and everything between the different VPSAs. Now let's talk about HA just quickly. High availability systems, let's go back one more slide, Sean, there we go. A highly available system says we have redundancy all the way up through the model. So in this case, if we lost a core, we're fine. If we lost a storage node, we're okay. If we lost a disk, we're protected by RAID. If we lost memory, if we lost cache, and trust me, 7 years of operating these clouds, we have lost some items. Things fail. That's the reality in life. Things fail. Everybody's had a computer that's failed. But a good architecture says continue to ride through those failures and continue to operate. So now we have event number 1 and event number 2. Now you can go to the next slide, Sean. And let's go ahead and talk about the different events that are coming up. Event number 1 maybe is a large VPSA, 2 is a little smaller, 3, 4, 5. All these are completely air-gapped. They're completely segmented. They have their own login credentials. They have their own role base. This guy, Bob, can look at it, but he can't touch it. Bill can log in. Everything is like you just bought 5 different storage area networks or 5 different SANs, but you only did it on OpEx. So we have the ability to grow these. We have the ability to contract these. We can do whatever we wish. This historically might have been 2 or 3 different storage silos in the past that we're now going to basically bring everything together, but we're going to make sure that we don't forget the fact that everything, especially in this particular market, has to be isolated. And then the next slide is how do we use this? You know, and so basically we can then connect this a couple of different ways. Like I had said earlier, in the cloud and the colo and the on-prem, is let's say that you're in a CenturyLink data center and you're going to basically just cross connect or connect that into your VPSA using your virtual machines or using CenturyLink virtual machines in their cloud. You could also connect this into a colocation facility that you may be in, and that'll get you VPSA active access. And then you also could connect it into the public cloud, like Sean said, to boost, to use more compute. We have a customer that basically has pretty much this picture. Their virtual machine sits in a colo. They use our storage. They also boost out for testing and dev. They create snapshots and clones. They send the clones not to one of their physical machines, but they send a clone to a public machine that they don't own, so they can do testing and dev and taking a look at forensic data and things like that. And what ties this all together is Cloud Application Manager. You have one single screen to look at. You basically can do data migration, you can do data movement, you can do all kinds of different things using the CAM. And if you haven't seen a demo on CAM, I would ask all of you to contact your CenturyLink folks and get a demo on CAM, because I'll tell you, it's second to none. It's really some of the best cloud technology out there. So Sean, I'm going to pass it back to you, and let's talk about what an on-prem might look like and how we can basically work on these special events.
Sure. So if you think of day-to-day operations, you might have a officer that comes in and they've got video imaging that needs to be downloaded at the precinct. Typically goes off to the redaction software, comes in. That could be event one. Basically, it's their day of all their information. Again, this could be both body worn and dash cam to that specific officer even. Then the next officer comes in. But let's say that we actually have an event that occurs, event 3. This is a protest march that goes on. And now we've got multiple video imaging drop down, as well as potentially from the local stationary cameras and from the municipality itself, and then potentially even from the mass transit system, where they're catching it off the trains and the buses. Well, that comes in, we have that information, the event occurs, we store the information, maybe it's for a few days, maybe it's even a few weeks, but we realize there was no issue, there was no problem. This is the difference in this model. So every other vendor out there, EMC, IBM, NetApp, Pure, Nimble, you name it, they all have storage as a service as a line item. What it is, it's creative financing. The good ones will let you pay as you grow. What's the one thing they won't do? Shrink. So in a real world scenario, this event occurs, we sign out, we don't need that data, the imaging, we will get rid of it. You stop paying for it. You only pay for what you use. This is a key difference. And again, on premise, this is fully managed, all software, hardware, support 24/7, so that it's taking care of it and it can match your business need. To that end, you can start with just 2 nodes, 2 of our solutions. By the way, you can start very small. This is just 7U form factor. So this isn't talking about putting in an entire array in your place. Typically takes us about a quarter of an array, of a rack, I should say. And start with just 7U form factor. When you hit 70 to 80% utilization, we will ship you another and another and another. I say it kind of tongue in cheek, but it's the truth. I'd love somebody to actually do it someday. I'd love to see what the feedback was, but go to your current vendor for storage. Say, hey, you know what? I need some more storage. Could you please, ship me some? Say, sure, get us a PO and we'll get it done. It's like, no. I want you to ship me a box and then I'll pay you if I use it. That's literally what CenturyLink does with the Zadara solution. They will proactively stay ahead of your needs, so you're never run out of capacity. You're not having to go out and get POs and RFPs and all of that stuff to grow the business. You're also getting the latest and greatest technology, because the technology swapped out when it becomes available, rather than having to wait every 3 or 4 years when you do a refresh. We also have the most granular chargeback I have ever seen in the market. In 25 years of the business, I've never seen anybody. It literally shows the reads, writes, encryption, mirror, tells you the performance that was chosen, tells you the types of drives that were chosen, how many hours it was used in the month, and tells you that to the penny. The beauty of this is you can now do it by event, you could do it by department, by agency, because again, we talked about this briefly at the beginning. One of the big things is everybody would love to offer out multi-tenancy. They understand the value, but remember, number one, who's going to pay for it up front? Well, we address that. You don't have to. Number two, how are you going to have the security, the performance isolation, the dedicated physical operation to have an individual experience, but in a multi-tenant environment? Hopefully you saw from our previous slides, that's exactly what our patented technology does. That's how we were able to get the patent, by the way, is by having the multi-tenant with a single tenant experience and security and performance. And the third piece is, even if I had that, how in the world do I justify back to these different agencies and departments what they used? That just hit a home run. You now have this granularity, and even if you don't do chargebacks, which a lot of municipalities don't in mid-sized, smaller groups, I guarantee you'd love to be able to do a showback, right? To show that department or that agency, hey, by the way, this is your portion of it. If we look at a TCO, the typical cost, it is a real world actually, this happened last quarter, had a client who needed 300 terabyte. That was what they came out and got an RFP for. They said, we're gonna need 300 terabyte of storage. Well, as we talked to them, they would grow into 300 terabyte over 3 to 4 years was kind of the plan. So you see, we did a 3-year refresh cycle. Well, to purchase 300 terabyte with the mix of drives and the performance they needed, it was going to be about $1.5 million initially. To finance it, obviously, been drastically less. They only had to put, I think it was a third down, and then it goes up and obviously matches. But you'll see every 3 years now, they're doing a refresh. So this massive bump, even here where they're able to drag it out for 4 years, big increase when they have to buy the next round. Right? So anytime that you're doing the refresh is going to be a big bump. This is what we were able to do for them instead. When they said they needed 300 terabyte, they don't need 300 terabyte today. Nobody buys the storage they need today when you're making a capital acquisition, right? This is a paradigm shift. What if you could only pay for what you actually need today, knowing that you're going to get shipped more than you need? So what we found out is they had about 60 terabyte of actual usable data. So what we did, to be candid, we shipped them about 150 to start. They were able to grow into that. And then they had a little bit more. They created some VPSAs. We added some more storage nodes. If you look at this, and especially when you look at a 5-year, 7-year, 10-year, it's an exponential savings versus doing traditional, even finance storage. This is not creative financing. Everybody else's storage as a service, this is what it looks like. It's the black line. Traditional purchase is the red line. We're buying new storage every 4 years. In our case, it smooths that out. More importantly, you're actually getting to use what you actually purchased. I mentioned that earlier, right? If you only use 42, 48% by the time you do a refresh, what a waste of money. What if I only paid for what I was really using up to that point and just continue on? So CenturyLink brings you true enterprise class storage. This is a multi-tenant. Again, this isn't a gateway. This isn't a software overlay. This is true tier 1 storage that's elastic in all directions. It's universal storage that matches all your business use cases, so you don't have to have all these silos of storage. It is designed as 100% OpEx, but to that end, federal government in particular is very problematic. Basically, they have funding that they get. They have a capital, budget, and they need to go spend it. States and municipalities, government agencies at that level, it really varies actually by state and county. But in general, the wonderful thing is we even can get really creative. We can give you a capital acquisition model. So we'll match your funding basically, but give you an OpEx utilization against it. Nobody else in the market can even talk about that. We already hit on this, and this is our big differentiator, 100% tenant isolation, physical, to the point we literally could hand that agency, here's your data, here are your drives. 100% privacy, performance, consistency, and control and access. And it scales up and out, and you never have to do a refresh again. You get the new storage as it becomes available without having to buy it. Specifically for agencies, this is why they're working with us. It's vendor agnostic, it's turnkey. You choose what you want to use for the cameras, for example, for the redaction software, those type of things. It's CJIS compliant at all access, at the access level, I should say. This is tier 1 high availability storage, 5 nines of uptime. Works with any video chipset level, manages all types of video evidence, be it body camera, interview room, CCT, you name it. Infinitely scalable. This was, in fact, Rackspace and NASA tested this up to just under an exabyte, so that scalability is definitely not an issue. And it's agile and responsive. We match to your customer need when you need it, rather than saying, well, here's what we've designed, have your business match what we've got. You control the environment. That's another big piece. and control the data. We have no access to the data. We just control the infrastructure, or manage it, I should say. You control it. And it's extremely cost effective. You can get started with this solution for a very low, literally just a few $1,000s on premise, fully managed in your own site. And in the cloud, it's literally paid by the hour, or in a data center. That gives you the opportunity to get started literally for pennies. So what we'd suggest, if hopefully there was of interest and you'd like some more information, the best way obviously to talk about this is with your individual agency, department, group, city and county, because everybody's a little unique. So please follow up with your CenturyLink representative. If you don't know who that is, please reach out to Jim Maddox. Jim was our director who's on today, james.maddox@CenturyLink.com. And we have the chat window, so hopefully you all see that on your screens. If you can chat, if you have some questions, that seems to be the easiest way for people to ask questions. I know this was a lot to take in. I'm sure it's very different than what you've been hearing from everybody else out there. One of the conversations we've had with a number of agencies, actually, specific to Pure storage is fantastic, actually. Solid state disk, it's a all flash array. But the thing is, how often do you need that kind of performance? Maybe 10 to 20% of the time. Well, what if you could get pure performance when you need it, but then be able to put the data to about a fourth or fifth the cost for the other 80, 90% of the time, but still have access to it? And the other thing is that we have object storage. So for deep archive and long term, we can get down to extremely low price, especially on a per gigabyte basis. So it gives you a lot of different options to meet your day-to-day business needs, gives you the performance you need and the security need. So are there some questions? Don't know if we have any in the chat room.
So Sean, this is Doug. I do see a question coming in, and I won't talk about who put it in, but anyway, from one of the attendees, how do I get started with this? What is the process and procedure to get started? Well, like Sean said, we want to contact your CenturyLink representative, but what Zadara will offer with our partnership with CenturyLink is we'll offer proof of concepts. If it's on site or in the cloud, we can do that. So you can actually kick the tires for a month or two and see if this meets your needs based on some criteria that we want to be talking about as well. We can also do a demo, and we can actually show you the interface and how to create one. So we can spend a little bit more time and actually show you how this is configured. And we generally ask for, around 30-day shipment windows. So we generally stock a lot of this equipment. There is a lot of hardware involved here, but like Sean said, we can start with 7RU, and that'll get us about 100 terabytes of configuration. That's exactly how this county in North Carolina started. Was a little 7RU setup, about 100 terabytes, and now they've grown into it. The nice thing they told me was they would have had to buy 100 terabytes, but they only paid for 20 or 30 terabytes to start, and then they've grown up into it. They're still not at 100, and they're about a two-year-old customer. So a proof of concept, certainly within bounds, both in the cloud and on-prem. We can do a demo, and then we can basically ship this equipment from commitment to getting it on your site and having you up and running about 30 days to be able to do something like that. Thank you for that question.
Yep, and I see another question here. They're saying, how does this work with my current storage solution? That's actually a great question, because obviously, unless we're happen to be talking to a brand new county, everybody else out there has storage already. This is not, this doesn't go in and layer on top of your current storage. So I want that very clear. This isn't a software that you put on your EMC NetApp or something. This is in lieu of that, but in lieu with this caveat. We actually highly recommend keep your current storage. Absolutely, get the value out of it, but don't buy any more. Don't expand it. And if you have the opportunity, if maintenance is coming due, last quarter we had a client for just the maintenance, 1 year maintenance on their backup software and their storage, paid for 3 years of total use of this solution. So it was, in fact, it's interesting. The CIO for the state said, well, this is kind of like an instant ROI. I just kind of smiled. I said, yep. So it would work in conjunction. You could put it in the same rack and just do a cross connect into the servers so that your new data basically could be flowing from our stuff for being able to retrieve. Or the other thing, and this wasn't a question, but I'll just add to it, CenturyLink is offering out backup as a service and DR as a service. So you could have your current storage today, whatever provider it is, leveraging whatever your current backup software, Veeam, Commvault, etc., Zerto, you name it. And then we become the target for that within CenturyLink's data center. And that's been an extremely cost-effective way of unloading and freeing up space actually on your tier 1 expensive capital investment. And then over time, you have the option of also looking at this, since as we talked about earlier, we have the built-in replication comes with it. So you could drop your backup software entirely and save a good chunk of change and have a more mobile, secure environment to grow on-prem, but do that over time. It's not an all or nothing. Good question.
And those are the 2 questions I saw. I know that we promised to get out of here at 45 minutes after the hour. So if there are some more questions, we'll stay here for a little bit longer. But I'd like to thank everybody. And Jim, I think send it back over to you to thank your guests and to talk about next steps.
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate it. So I want to thank you all for joining. I'm going to follow up with a quick email to everyone who was on the webinar as well, just letting you know who to contact for what. And we're more than happy to do on-site meetings or additional phone conversations for anyone who has an interest in a follow-up conversation. Thank you.
Yeah, we can actually do a webinar for your broader team. Often there's just 1 or 2 people kind of looking at this, and that's worked very effectively. If there are other individuals that should be hearing about it, potentially even other agencies. We've been doing that with a lot of cities and counties, that they'll get the whole group together and we can come in and actually present to everybody. And hopefully you see this isn't a sales pitch, it's really educational, just a different way of thinking about it. Thanks everybody for your time.
Thank you, everybody. Have a great week.